What is the physical presence requirement for naturalization? I'm Erick Widman, I'm an immigration lawyer, and there are two main requirements that deal with the amount of time you spent in the US that you need to show you fulfill in order to naturalize. These two requirements actually rhyme a little bit. There's the continuous residence requirement and the physical presence requirement. Overall, I've found that if you have an engineering, scientific type of mind, you're going to prefer the physical presence test because it's more objective, it's more black and white. Social scientists and many lawyers like to argue the gray areas of the continuous residence requirement. That's what we're good at in many ways. But the physical presence test is much more objective and it can give you more certainty as you go about calculating whether you qualify to naturalize or not. It's also known as the boots on the ground test. Were you physically present in the US or not for at least half the amount of time in the statutory period that you're required to show that you were here to naturalize? And so if you're applying to naturalize on your own, you have to have shown that out of the 5 years preceding your application, you've been here half of that time, physically present in the US for 30 months out of those 60 months. Or if you're applying on the basis of your marriage to your US citizen spouse, your spouse is a US citizen, you can naturalize in 3 years of being a permanent resident. And so half of that period, you must have been physically present in the US. So half of that time is 1.5 years physically present in the US. So how do you know if you were physically present or not? The N400 form gives guidance on the amount of time that you must have been outside the US to show that that was a day that counts against you. So for example, if you are from Washington State and you're traveling up to Canada and you only are gone for 8 hours, it's a day trip. You can squeeze in a visit to beautiful Vancouver Island, come back down before 24 hours have elapsed. That does not count as a day outside the US for that chart on the N400, part 9 of the chart currently, where you list out how many days have you spent outside the US where the day counts as 24 hours or more. So if you spent less than 24 hours on a trip to Canada or anywhere else, that does not count against you. So if you're regularly doing that trip, you would not violate the physical presence requirement. You would fulfill that requirement even if you have these day trips outside the US quite a bit. But if you have spent more than half the required time physically present in the US with these trips that do last 24 hours, you are unable to naturalize. You don't meet the requirement that is necessary. And you have the burden of showing USCIS at your interview and before that on the application that you do fulfill the requirements of the physical presence test. One of the nice things, by the way, of the electronic filing of the N400 application is that it automatically calculates for you if you have spent too many days outside the US to qualify, if you don't meet the physical presence test. Sometimes the math can be surprisingly tricky when you're putting together the record from your passport and trying to remember exactly when you're outside the US. The online application can help with that. We also highly recommend that you use a time and date internet calculator to determine how many actual days there are between, for example, January 1st and March 31st, because February has 28 days. So you just don't want to guess what that is. You want to calculate it exactly. I hope this was helpful. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.